Alec Lasley from thehoosier.com joins me now. Big day yesterday for Indiana. Alec just got off with Dylan Sin, but obviously the biggest win for Indiana, not only this season. I mean, I know Purdue was a gigantic win in other ways, but this is big in different ways. And I think what it meant for this team and what it could mean for this team going forward is huge. Of course, the one thing they cannot do is lay an egg today. But it's going to be very interesting to see how they come out and play today.
Yeah, obviously, there's no doubt about it. Yesterday was an absolute must win. I still think, we talked about this last week with Dylan too. I still think they need to win this one today to feel really good about solidifying their spot. Obviously, if they win today, there's no way around it. They're going to be in the field. They've gotten some help, but I think yesterday was a little bit of a bad night for them in terms of kind of where everyone's sitting on the bubble, especially with that Oklahoma win, Virginia Tech making a little bit of a run too. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. Indiana played its best kind of a 12-minute stretch there in that 31-9 run to end the season, or to end the game there, which ultimately kept their season alive. And the biggest thing for them is continuing that into today. And that's, one thing that Dylan talked about and you guys just talked about in the last segment there was these teams who get into a little bit of a run playing either if it's the first day of the conference tournament, the second day of the conference tournament, right? Especially being this early game. You see it all the time going back multiple years now where these are where teams really get on a run and make some of these upsets because you have a number one seed like in Illinois or any of these other teams that play in these early games that may have a bye the first day or even a 2-day bye. And they're not used to the arena. They're not used to having almost a week and a half off, right, between games. And they're not in the swing of things. And Indiana coming off a huge, not only emotional win, but just the momentum that they can carry into today. It'll be really interesting to see the first 5 to 10 minutes of this game could tell you a lot about how the way this game's going to end up. Because if Indiana continues that last 12 minutes from yesterday and carries that into the first 5-10 minutes of today, that could go a long way in taking this game, not only but building on that and going through the rest of the Big Ten tournament and the rest of the season. So it'll be a very interesting opening stretch for Indiana today.
I think yesterday, one thing they showed me is they're hungry. They want this. There's been a lot of question, how bad or do they want it, because we would see them just fall apart at the end of halves, at the end of games, and we saw it happen time and time again. But then yesterday, you're kind of thinking that, and all of a sudden, no, they fought and fought and fought, which is what you've wanted to see all season, fighting till the end, which now they've got that fight, which bores confidence in each other. It's a smaller group. I think that has kind of finally developed into, now injuries have played a big part of that, of course, Trey Galloway being out, Rob Fennessy being out, but now you've got your pieces back that you need. Now, the one curious thing is Tamar Bates was not a part of that yesterday.
Yep, and I mean, I think you look at the rotations and the comments that Mike Woodson's made throughout the better half of the last 2 months here. He just doesn't have a lot of confidence in getting consistency from that bench, and that's why you see guys like Jordan Geronimo play 20 minutes one game or 15 minutes one game and only 6 minutes the next, just due to the inconsistency of every single player in that rotation. And that's why he sticks with those starters a lot, because while they are inconsistent, they seem to be a little bit more consistent in terms of
they're less inconsistent.
Yeah, exactly, and that's unfortunately just the way that Indiana's been put together this season. But now you're really starting to get a lot more consistency from a Miller Kopp, who's played really well over the last 3 games for Indiana, whether it's making shots, whether it's getting some timely rebounds or some hustle plays, but he's really stretching the floor in his ability to kind of come up with timely threes. He hit a couple yesterday in the second half on that run that Indiana went on. But the biggest thing that it's going to come down to is the defensive end of the floor. Indiana, well, that's what they've had the backbone of their success this season, coming from the defensive end of the floor. And yesterday in the second half, when it really ballooned up to that 17-point lead, Michigan was scoring 1.75 points per possession up to that point in the second half. It doesn't matter.
Did that break the record? I'm kidding.
It probably was up there. I mean, that's how poorly Indiana was playing on the defensive end of the floor. And we've always heard from not only Mike Woodson, but guys like Trace Jackson Davis, Race Thompson, Xavier Johnson talk about when they get on these runs, it starts from the defensive end. They get out in transition. They get some easy buckets. You cut that lead down from whether it's a 15-point lead, 20-point lead, or 17 like it was yesterday. They quickly went on a 7-0 run in 3 minutes, in less than 3 minutes. I think it was 2 minutes and 50 seconds there to cut that lead down to 10. And so now with 10 minutes left, you're sitting at a 10-point deficit. That's a lot easier to overcome than a 17-point deficit. And they forced, 11 out of the 13 turnovers in the second half for Michigan. So it starts on the defensive end of the floor, and that's where they're really able to get some consistency and some flow from that offense by getting out in transition, getting some easy looks, and then just really starting to build some confidence. And you saw it from Xavier Johnson all afternoon, and nothing new from him. It's a common theme where he's the only one who can really create offense from this team. And when he went out in the first half, that really, really hurt them. But when he was able to come back in the second half, play under control, especially after he picked up that early third foul, that changed the game for Indiana. And you heard Devontae Jones talk about that. You heard Juwan Howard talk about that post-game. His energy really changed the narrative in the way that second half was going.
Yeah, Xavier Johnson from the tip looked hungry but controlled, was moving the ball around, not turning it over, taking care of the ball. And the biggest thing for me in that second half, India, they went on you said a 31-9 run, but it was a 28-4 run starting at the 11:04 mark. I think I went back and looked down to like inside the 2-minute mark. 28-4. That's reminiscent of the 28-0 run about 5 years ago. They put on them to just shock Michigan, but that was kind of like the same yesterday. I mean, a 28-4 run is like, man, the offense was there. Even in the past when the defense had been there, the offense hadn't always been there. They hadn't always been able to use the value of what they did on defense on the other end. This time they did. And that I would think and hope gives them confidence going forward to continue doing it just like that. The only problem they've had is having success and then going away from what had been successful. So let's hope that they stay where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest thing going into today is continuing that momentum, but getting that consistency from game to game, especially from the bench. A couple of the listeners over here talking about Trey Galloway and Jordan Geronimo, and we had a piece up about it yesterday. And everyone in the post game, from Mike Woodson to Trace Jackson Davis to Xavier Johnson, talked about those two players. Without Trey Galloway or Jordan Geronimo, Indiana doesn't win that game yesterday, and Indiana honestly doesn't stay afloat in some of these games earlier in the season too. Without those two guys, without their energy coming off the bench, without their ability to really be those versatile players to get the run started on the defensive end, because of their ability to switch, because of their athleticism, their ability to get into passing lanes and create some easy offense. How many times have we seen Trey Galloway just jump a passing lane, get out for an easy bucket, and start to kind of get some momentum going? And without those two guys, I think all season, and you look back to obviously Trey Galloway missing almost 16 games up to this point in the season. You compound that with Rob Finney obviously missing a month of action, and those are two guys that, along with Jordan Geronimo, really kind of got that run going for Indiana yesterday. And it was a lineup that I think you're probably going to see a lot more of today, especially if Indiana gets down into a little bit of a hole, just due to their really good ability to play as a unit and a full team on the defensive end and really kind of spark some of those runs.
So speaking of today, first thing, the importance that jumps out to me is Xavier Johnson staying out of foul trouble because he's probably going to draw a tough defensive assignment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the first game, and it was Trent Frazier who obviously killed Indiana. He was 8 of 11 from the field, but it was also Jacob Grandison, the kind of stretch four, who really kind of created a little bit of a matchup problem early in the second half. There, he hit a couple big time shots, a couple big threes to really get Illinois on that second half run to eventually take over the game. He's going to be a game time decision today. If he doesn't play, that puts Illinois in a little bit of a hole because they don't have that true stretch forward who can really knock down some shots from the outside like Grandison can at 41%. So that's going to be something to watch here as we in the next few hours get into warmups and see if he's going to be able to go. Because if not, that's going to put Indiana in a lot better position to not only potentially play Jordan Geronimo a little bit more, especially with kind of maybe some of their deficiencies. Race Thompson and Trace Jackson Davis's deficiencies guarding on the perimeter. But also it just gives Indiana a lot more options defensively if you don't have a guy who can stretch the floor, shoot 41%. So a couple of those things right there definitely stick out immediately. And then I think you look at Kofi Cockburn and potentially start Race Thompson on Kofi Cockburn instead of Trace Jackson Davis. Just due to obviously the foul trouble that Trace can get in early in games. And, whether we look at the Purdue game and see the offensive flow that Indiana had when Trace was out, or some different games this season where the offense tends to be a little bit more free flowing in big games, especially like you saw in the second half yesterday. You don't win that game without Trace Jackson Davis, the way he took that over too, and you're going to need him on the floor. And so at the end of the day, I think limiting those fouls, being able to throw different bodies, obviously Michael Dorr, Jordan Geronimo are going to play key parts, whether it's for 5 minutes, or whether it's for 20 in this game against Kofi Cockburn, and their ability to really kind of play one-on-one defense or just a slight kind of a fade down from one of the top guards. But I think if you can limit the double teams on Kofi Cockburn today and force him to go up one-on-one against Michael Dorr or Jordan Geronimo or Race Thompson or Trace, I think you're going to be a lot more successful than allowing guys like Alfonso Plummer or Trent Frazier or Curbelo getting hot from the perimeter or getting into the lane and creating for others.
Yeah, as yesterday you saw hero, well, I don't want to say hero, but the unexpected play from certain guys of Indiana stepping up. Jordan Geronimo. Today, that could be Michael Dorr, because I think that he probably – Trace Jackson cannot guard Kofi Cockburn. I'll just be straight up honest about that. Michael Dorr may be the guy that comes in to relieve Race and could be the difference maker. And that's what Indiana is probably going to need to win a game like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you go back to the first matchup, it wasn't Kofi Cockburn that killed you efficiency-wise. I mean, he was only 6 of 13 from the field. And we both know he's not getting any looks outside of the either post block there. So the fact that you limited him to only 6 of 13, the defense was fine on him. It was just their inability, and they've shown this at times this season, Indiana's inability to guard perimeter players and slow down perimeter players. And that's going to be a key. With Rob Finney back, with Trey Galloway, I think both of those guys help with guarding either if it's Plummer or Frazier. But I think still Xavier Johnson's role on the defensive end is going to be key as well, like you mentioned. And I think those guard matchups are going to be the ones that ultimately decide the outcome of this game.
Any other surprises that you've seen so far in this tournament?
No, I know you guys talked about it briefly with Iowa, that offensive performance they put on yesterday. I mean, they're one of the hottest teams offensively in the country here, and if they can continue to shoot the ball like that, that's going to be extremely fun to watch if you're not playing them. I think the biggest surprise is just Michigan State and Ohio State. All right, Ohio State still dealing with a lot of injuries. They fumble one against Penn State, not playing their best at the time of year that you really need to be, and they're really slipping. And also Michigan State. You'd think that they at some point would be able to find some sort of consistency, and they just really haven't. And I think despite the win yesterday, they just continue to show a lot of deficiencies in that guard play that we've talked about when Indiana played them, or talked about them in different portions of the show this season. And that's just something to watch for Michigan State if they want to make any sort of run or even win a game in the NCAA tournament. That backcourt and their inability to have a real go-to player offensively is something that I know Tom Izzo's kind of pulling his whatever little bit of hair he has left on that head out.